بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to complete almost half of the month of Shaban, and the month of Ramadan is coming up very soon, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in the remainder of this month and allow us to reach Ramadan. There is a night from the nights of Shaban that we need to clarify the ruling regarding, because many people have misconceptions regarding the midnight of Shaban, which is the 15th night of Shaban. So what is authentic regarding the 15th night of Shaban? What is inauthentic regarding the 15th night of Shaban? Sometimes people get confused regarding what should be done on this night and what should not be done, and what is the significance of this night. So every year when this night approaches, we clarify these matters. So tonight is actually the 14th night of Shaban, and tomorrow night will be the 15th night of Shaban. There are many narrations regarding the 15th night of Shaban, but most of them are either very weak or even fabricated. And there is one narration which Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah said is authentic, but there are many other muhaddithin who have disagreed with him regarding that, and they said that it's not authentic. So many of the scholars from the past and the present were of the opinion that there's actually not one single authentic hadith about the 15th night of Shaban. There's not one single authentic hadith about the 15th night of Shaban. But Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, who was one of the great muhaddithin of the modern era, he said that there is one hadith that is authentic regarding it, and that is the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَيَطَّلِعُ فِي لَيْلَةِ النِّصْفِ مِنْ شَعْبَانَ فَيَغْفِرُ لِجَمِيعِ خَلْقِهِ إِلَّا لِمُشْرِكٍ أَوْ مُشَاحٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He looks at His creation on the middle night of Shaban, which is the 15th night of Shaban, and He forgives everyone. He forgives everyone on that night, except for a mushrik. A mushrik is a person who commits shirk, a person who associates partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are excluded from this forgiveness on that night. إِلَّا لِمُشْرِكٍ أَوْ مُشَاحٍ. And the second person who is excluded from the forgiveness on that night is a mushahin. Mushahin is a person who has some type of enmity or some type of hatred towards his brother. So you had some type of a dispute with someone, and you don't want to talk to that person, and you're angry with him, and you have hatred and enmity in your heart towards him. This is a person who is also excluded from that forgiveness on the 15th night of Shaban. So Allah forgives everyone except for a mushrik or a mushahin. And this hadith was collected by Ibn Majah rahimahullah, and Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, he has said that this hadith is authentic, but many other scholars from the past and present said that even that one is not authentic. Alright, so regardless whether we take this hadith as authentic or not, what is very clear and apparent is that there is no special act of ibadah that is prescribed for that night, for sure. That is for sure, without a doubt. There is no special type of ibadah that is prescribed to be performed on the 15th night of Shaban. So one of the innovations that some groups do on the 15th night of Shaban is they pray a special prayer in the night of 100 rak'at, 100 rak'ah. And they think that this is a special prayer that we should pray on the 15th night of Shaban. But there is no authenticity to this whatsoever. There is no basis for this whatsoever. Also, a common misconception is that people think that because of the virtue of the 15th night of Shaban, that we should fast on the 15th day of Shaban. Now the 15th day of Shaban, it is from Ayyamul Bild. It is from the white days, the 13th, the 14th and the 15th, which is sunnah to fast in general. It's sunnah to fast on the 13th, the 14th and the 15th of the lunar months. So if you're fasting for that reason, because it's sunnah to fast on 13th, 14th and 15th, then that's fine. But if you're singling out the 15th alone because you think that it has any special significance because it is the day that follows the 15th night of Shaban, then this is a misconception. So fasting on the 15th, if you're including it as being one of the days of Ayyamul Bid, which it's sunnah to fast, 13th, 14th, and 15th, that's fine. If it's for that reason. If you're giving it significance because it is one of those days that the Prophet ﷺ in general advised to fast, 13th, 14th, and 15th, of Shaban and of other months as well. But to single out just the 15th day of Shaban, not because it is from the Ayyamul Bid, but because it is the day that follows the night of the 15th of Shaban, then that is where the problem lies. That can be considered an innovation. So there is no special ibadah, no specific special ibadah that is prescribed for the 15th night of Shaban, nor any special ibadah that is particularly prescribed for the 15th day of Shaban. Now, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said that some of the Salaf, some of the pious predecessors, some of the scholars from the earlier generations, they used to give some special significance to the 15th night of Shaban because perhaps they considered some of these hadith authentic. Like Shaykh al-Albani, he considered this hadith authentic that Allah forgives everyone on that night except for a mushrik or a mushahin. Alright, so if you accept that this is an authentic hadith, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's forgiving people on this night, that means there is some special virtue in this night. If Allah is choosing this night to forgive people, that means there is something special about that night, if you accept that hadith to be authentic. So some of the Salaf, some of the great scholars of the earlier generations, they would give some special significance to that night, but not with any specific type of ibadah, like a specific number of rak'at or anything like that. No. Rather, they would maybe do some extra prayers without any specific number. Maybe a few rak'at, without any specific number. It could be more or it could be less, without specifying anything. And they would not get together and pray in a jama'ah or pray together, because this is not something that has been narrated from the Prophet ﷺ. So there were some of the scholars of the past who used to, on their own individually, do some extra prayers and do some extra dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that night without specifying any particular amount or any particular number. Just doing it in general. Because they said, okay, it's a special night. If Allah is forgiving people on this night, that means it has some special virtue. So let us just increase in our acts of worship during this night. In a general sense, not in a specific sense. And in an individual sense, not in a communal sense. So some of the scholars of the past used to do that based on their understanding that perhaps some of those hadith might be authentic, as Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah considered that hadith authentic. So the takeaway point here is that there is no particular special type of ibadah to do on that night. No specific number of rak'at that you should pray because it's the 15th night of Shaban. No special fasting that you should fast on the 15th because it is particularly the 15th of Shaban. So there's nothing like that. But if we take the hadith of Ibn Majah to be authentic, then we should know that it's a day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or it's a night that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives people. So in order to be receptive for that forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if someone wants to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or read Quran, or do some prayers during that night, inshallah there's no problem in that, as long as you're not making it something specific, as long as you're doing it in a general sense. And this has been narrated from some of the Salaf, as Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentioned. So that's fine. But to make it something specific, that's wrong. That would fall into innovation in the religion. So you will find people from both camps. There are some people, some scholars, who say that there is absolutely nothing authentic that has been mentioned about the 15th night of Shaban, so you should just treat it like a normal night, nothing special. And then there are some who say that a few hadith might be authentic regarding it. So if you want to individually and not specifically, but you do some extra type of prayer or some extra type of dhikr without specifying a number or without specifying a certain amount, then some of the scholars have said that that is okay. But the point is not to specify a certain number of rak'at or certain surahs from the Quran. There's one innovation that people do on the 15th night of Shaban, is they will pray a certain number of rak'at, and they will say in the first rak'ah you have to read Surah Yasin, in the second rak'ah you have to read such and such surah, in the third rak'ah you read such and such surah. They specify surahs and they specify a certain number of rak'at. This is innovation. This is bid'ah, and this has no basis in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, so that definitely should be avoided. So these are just some points regarding the 15th night of Shaban. Also, as the hadith mentions, Allah forgives everyone except a mushrik or a mushahin. Alhamdulillah, none of us are mushrikeen. We all worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. We don't commit shirk, alhamdulillah. But as for the other part, as for the other exception, as for the other exclusion from the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that night is the mushahin. And the mushahin is someone who has hatred towards his brother. Someone who has some type of enmity in their heart towards their brother. So, if you want to be included in having the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the 15th night of Sha'ban, then make sure you clear out any type of enmity or hatred you have for your brothers in your heart before that night comes. So if you have any dispute or any grudge with your brother, then go to him and clarify it, inshallah. If you can do that today, tonight or tomorrow during the day, it's better, inshallah. So that when the 15th night of Sha'ban comes, then inshallah you will be included in the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the people on that night. If we assume that hadith is authentic, as some scholars assumed that it was. So that's a good thing to do anyways, to fix your relationships with people and to clear out any enmity or grudges or hatred that you have in your hearts towards your brothers or your sisters. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us the truth as the truth and allow us to follow it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us falsehood as falsehood and allow us to stay away from it. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala